Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, Yarby Laws, and this is my co-host.
Christopher Wells.
Top notch.
We appreciate all the support on our recent content. And before we do get started, please don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the OBT Podcast for more content and updates.
Yeah, so we got a big episode for you guys today. We're going to talk about some injuries. We're going to talk about LeBron's return. And we're probably also going to talk about some of the games and some of the teams from the last few days. But first, we'll start off with injuries. A lot of big injuries around the NBA. Just the last couple of days, we lost for at least a few weeks a couple of stars, big stars, including Wemby to a calf injury, and then Giannis with a groin injury, right? So we'll start with Wemby. He got hurt in the Warriors game, the last one they played, where they played a back-to-back against the Warriors in San Antonio. I didn't really see the specific play where he got hurt, but he played through it. He played it out. They ended up losing both games, and it was kind of a brutal couple of losses, right? Because in both games they had leads. The first game they had a big lead in the first half and then lost it to the Warriors. Then in the second game, they were actually down for most of the game. They made a comeback in the fourth quarter, and then unfortunately the late game offense once again was kind of putrid. De'Aaron Fox missed a bunch of makeable shots. You know, we can talk about that, I guess, if you guys want as well. But then they also got hit with some news. We're recording, and not long before that, Stephon Castle is going to be out for at least a couple of weeks with, I believe, a hamstring injury. So now you're talking about they're already down. They were already down Dylan Harper. And now they're going to be without their best player, and then probably the third best player in Stephon Castle. So it's been pretty brutal for them, where they got off to a great start, and now they're going to have to deal with multiple guys being out. So how do you guys think that they should approach this? Because we know with pretty much every team, when you lose your best player for a long stretch, and this is going to be at least a few weeks, because I think it's reevaluated in 3 to 4 weeks, so it'll probably be more than that. There's just not much you can do. But with all the optimism and hype surrounding the Spurs and this great stretch they've been on, now it seems like they're going to probably take a tumble. So, how should they handle the rest of the stretch without Wemby and potentially Castle for a while?
Yeah, it's rough because they already had, no Dylan Harper or whatever as well. So, their depth, I think, at that guard position is going to definitely be hurting. But they still are a pretty deep team, right? You still have Vassell as in the mix as well. But, yeah, being without Wemby obviously is the biggest, I think, part of the game plan that they're going to have to figure out, because the offense is pretty much engineered around him. He obviously anchors the defense as well. So there's no replacing him, but I think they do have some serviceable guys to kind of fill in the cracks with maybe Dylan Harper and Stephon Castle. But outside of that, they might be cooked without Wemby.
It's funny, man, because we talk about Wemby, right? Wemby's an amazing player. We all know that, right? But the last 2 seasons has already dealt with injuries. Let's not forget that. The last 2 seasons have dealt with injuries, and they're concerning injuries, right? Had a blood clot, which is no joke, right? And then recently this injury right here. And so when people say I think we just got to slow down, right? That's a concerning thing if you're a Spurs, right? He's always dealing with injury. I'm not calling him injury prone because he's far from that. But if injuries keep building up, then that's a concern factor, right? Because their main goal is to head into that postseason, and he's their number one guy, and try to compete and try to win. Especially to the start of the year, we didn't expect them to play that well. So the fact that their goal right now is yo, we want a top seed in this Western Conference because we all know it's tough. They all know it's tough in the West, no matter what it is. I think the Clippers are a bad team, but you never know, right? They might can come back from all the way down to the top seeding. You know what I mean? Dallas might do the same thing. So, losing Castle, losing Harper. I know a lot of people are saying, yo, let's trade Fox, but I think this makes more sense. They keep him because injuries are a factor. And I understand he played horrible down the stretch, but at the end of the day, he's a star player and he can still help this team stay in games and still win, right? You brought up Devin Vassell. They also got that Johnson dude,
Yeah.
not
Keldon
Keldon Johnson, right? Remember, Keldon Johnson and Vassell were their star guys when there was no Wemby, when there was no these Dylan Harper and stuff like that. So I thought it's unfortunate that these injuries happen, but we'll see what this team's made of.
Yeah. If you currently look as of our recording right now, on November 18th, they're fifth in the Western Conference, right? And they won their last game without Wemby, but we didn't know at that point that he was going to be out for a while. But they're currently sitting at 5, but they're really right there with Minnesota, with Golden State, with Phoenix, and obviously right now they won't have the tiebreaker against Golden State because they just lost to them the last couple of times. And that's a good point about the Fox thing, right? Because that was kind of a topic of discussion going into the season where everybody's kind of wondering, how is this going to work? Because we didn't see a lot of games with those guys together. And, we actually, both Yarby and I discussed about a week or so ago, when he first came back, we were kind of trying to figure out, whether or not he was going to work. And, Yarby was kind of in the position of like, I don't necessarily know if this is going to work out.
Yeah.
And, in the first game against the Pelicans, right, he looked perfectly fine. But then in that second game, and then the third game with Golden State, it was pretty rough down the stretch. But like you said, Top Notch, like because Fox is who he is, right? He is a guy that was able to get to the postseason and with the Sacramento Kings and had some big performances for them. I just don't really know what you can really do about that at this point. So I mean, we'll see, but it's tough.
Yeah.
So next we'll move on to the next injury, which sounds horrible, but we got Giannis, where as of today, we got the news that he's going to be out at least a week or so with the groin injury. And they were just playing in a game against Cleveland, right? And they were pretty back and forth in that game, right? Like they were very competitive and they were right there. But then, of course, he gets hurt and now he's going to be out for a while. And the Bucks have kind of been reeling a little bit. They're 4-6 in their last 10. That was a team where both you and I were not very high on that team going into the season.
Mm-hmm.
Got a lot of comments about it, about the Milwaukee Bucks. And, and it's understandable in terms of the Bucks fans, right? Because they felt like, hey, you guys said that they had the worst offseason of any team this summer. We don't think that. We think this team can be relatively solid, with Giannis, right? Because we're younger, we're more athletic. And at the beginning of the season, it looked like that. But they've had some rough losses. I mean, they've had some signature wins, but now they're basically 500. They're 8-7, ninth in the Eastern Conference, right behind the Chicago Bulls, right ahead of the Orlando Magic, and they've got some really good guys. Ryan Rollins, right, has been a great standout so far this season, right? Former Wizard. I believe he was in that Poole trade.
Yes, he
right?
was.
Yeah, exactly. So you watch him, and he's been playing great. And kind of, I guess he's the Dame replacement, sort of. He's averaging 17-5, 50 from the field, 46 from three, just a blur in transition. So you can see the value he brings. But now it's going to be tough because now they're going to be without their best player. And you just kind of wonder, okay, they got off to a really good start early on, but now they might kind of be starting to trend downwards. But the only thing that can save them is they're in the East. How many of those teams that are lower than them can really actually come back and move ahead of them? Maybe Orlando, maybe Boston, but other than that, they're pretty comfortably ahead of, everybody past the 11 seed. So it's a tough break, and we made the case that, yeah, if he is hurt and he has to miss any level of significant time, it might be tough, because they got that first game, I think, where he was out against Golden State. But other than that, it's been kind of tough. So I think they've been somewhat of a pleasant surprise, but as of right now, they're starting to kind of, fall behind. But in fairness, they're 4.5 games back from the 1-seeded Detroit Pistons, right, who've been playing fantastic. But I don't know. This might be tough for them. I think it will be. And this is kind of the question of, okay, well, how long can the Bucks hold on? How is Giannis going to feel? He won't be traded, I don't think, this season. It'll be a summer thing. But I don't know. It's not looking great for them after a really good start, I think, to the season.
Yeah, this upcoming stretch for them is probably going to show, how valuable Giannis is as a player to them, being the franchise guy, because they're not going to get a lot of wins without the guy, point blank period, right? You already don't have Kevin Porter Jr., so where are you going to find, your offense? You're going to be depending on guys like Ryan Rollins, like you said, very pleasant surprise, but I don't think that's sustainable. I didn't think anything that they were doing was going to be sustainable going into this season. Like, it was a great, little streak that they had, but I expected this team to be bad. That's why, you and I both picked the unders. We didn't like their offseason, and I think you're seeing, why. Because as soon as Giannis goes down, you don't have anything, to really stay afloat. And I think they're going to have a trouble on both ends of the floor because Giannis is, he's been great offensively this season, but he's been just as good defensively as well. So take him out. And like we already talked about it in the offseason, it's going to feel like the meme. And I think now, you don't have Giannis, the floor general, to make these guys look so much better. So in my opinion, they might be cooked till he gets back. But it's only like what, a 2-week thing till he gets like reevaluated or whatever. So we'll see.
We'll see.
Man, listen, the Milwaukee. If you really think about it, the Eastern Conference is really bad. Like I know we say this,
Mm-hmm.
but they're really bad. Like there's no one really thought the Chicago Bulls was going to be sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
Milwaukee Bucks wasn't going to be sustainable. Orlando, I thought they'll be better than what they are, but they're a man, right? Miami kind of fell off a little bit.
Yep.
Like if you look at this East, it's like you want to say Knicks and Cavs, but the Cavs to me are still mid. The Knicks have moments where they're mid. Like the East is so wide open, and that's why I think if you make one big trade, somebody can win the Eastern Conference. But let's talk about Giannis's injury, man. I view it as like the LeBron injury, right? LeBron sat out for a couple of weeks. He's finally back. He looked at his team and says, "Listen, is this team good enough to go win a championship with me being there?" And so he's seeing, okay, Luka and AR and all these other role players are stepping up. I look at Giannis doing the same thing because I think Giannis does leave this team, like you said, he brought up in the summer. I think he does eventually get traded. And if they can't win max 3 games during this 2-week stretch, I don't know what their schedule currently look like because they can have some back-to-backs and tough matchups. But like you said, there's no scoring. And a lot of people don't talk about this, but the Kyle Kuzma trade was a failure. You traded for him to bring in more scoring, and his IQ is the lowest of the lowest, right? He just has no IQ. I mean, you should know, right?
Yeah,
Yarby,
I'm aware.
right? So Doc Rivers have him come off the bench so he can have less mistakes, but you're gonna have to rely on these players like a Kyle Kuzma, like a Gary Trent, like a Bobby Portis to step up. Now, I've seen Bobby Portis have big moments when Giannis goes out, but that's not going to be enough. You know what I mean? So it's funny when Bobby Portis said, "Yo, we have the best bench in the NBA." With Portis and Kuzma, I'm like, dude, this dude's delusional as hell. Like, let's stop there.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's funny, like you mentioned, Yarby, the fact that we talked about Giannis, where he's playing the point basically for his team, and all these guys are playing off of him, and he's using his threat, as an unstoppable offensive engine to allow these guys to be whatever the best version of themselves really is. But now, like you said, with him out, now they kind of have to revert to, okay, now we're gonna have to individually find different ways to win. The next few games, so they play Philly, they play Detroit, they play Portland, then they play Miami, then they play the Knicks. So that's the next.
Those are all
10
losses.
days.
Those are all losses. Those are 5 losses in a row.
Then
I'm telling you right now,
I agree.
all losses.
I agree.
Yeah, then they finish off the month with, so it's a back-to-back where it's the Knicks, and then they play Brooklyn, then they play Washington. So, we'll see what happens, but that's where it's going to be tough. And it's funny with this team this season, when you look at how they've been playing, they've actually been a better team on the offensive end than the defensive end, which we kind of thought would be the opposite, right? Like, I mean, the numbers have changed, since then, but prior, to what was going on, right? If you look, they're 16th right now in offensive rating. So that was about 11 or 10, maybe a week or so ago, right? Before they had the bad losses against the Lakers and then the bad loss against Cleveland. And then defensive rating, they're 22nd. So right now, they're not looking really that great on either end of the floor, but their offense is better than their defense. And without Giannis, you would think that on both ends of the floor, especially defensively, it's going to fall off a cliff. So it might look like the worst defensive team or one of them in the league. And then you don't have the downhill force that Giannis provides. And I mean, it's your best player. It's like with Wemby. If you lose your best player, you're going to be in a tough spot. And, we'll see if they can hold on. But I think it's going to be really difficult for them. And like you mentioned, Trent, or top notch, I mean, just in general, those are some tough games that I think that they're going to be in my opinion.
Yo, I was laughing, right? Because they made a big move this offseason, and we didn't bring him up once in this video because he has been so mid. like Miles Turner, like to this moment, I still don't understand why they brought him into this team. I don't get it.
I agree.
Like they said, yo, let's replace Dame, bring in Miles Turner,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no way they really thought Ryan Rollins was going to be what he is. I don't care what they thought.
Exactly.
They didn't think that. They said we're going to run with no point guard. Oh, we brought in Cole Anthony. That's our starting point guard right there, right? Because this is all off season. This is what they're thinking.
Yep.
They're like, okay, we got Gary Trent and Taurean Prince. Like, don't get me wrong, they're good role players, but they're role players for a reason. They're inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
So, this Bucks team is screwed, and they're, like I said, they're losing those last 5 games. And don't be surprised, right? if somehow, some way, Michael Porter Jr. drops 50 points when they play the Brooklyn Nets. I'm telling
Seriously.
you, like Brooklyn, he been hooping. He been playing good basketball. The team's really bad.
Yep.
But yeah, man, the Bucks, they're in a bad spot.
Exactly.
Yeah, Miles Turner this season, 12 points, 6 rebounds, a little under 2 blocks. 43% from three, but 44% from the field. And I mean, I guess you could make the case like, hey, they were winning games and Miles Turner wasn't playing that great offensively. But the point that you and I already brought up this summer was, well, he's not going to be playing next to Halliburton and the guys in Indiana. Obviously, Giannis is a great passer himself, right? But Halliburton, is just a different type of playmaker point guard, right? We see with the Pacers right now, even though they have a bunch of injuries, so it's not just Halliburton out, right? But he is the engine that drives that team, and it's a different situation, right? So I mean, when we talked about the Bucks summer, like we looked at the roster and we're like, okay, so before we knew what the heck was going to happen with Turner and everything else, we were like, all right, they're probably going to be without Dame. What's going to happen with Brook Lopez? What are they going to do, right? Then they end up doing what they did, and like you said, yeah, it came out of nowhere. It was a shock, but it's just not enough.
Mhm.
But like you said, top notch. The East is wide open, so we'll see what it looks like come playoff time. But our takeaway, I think, going into the season was, well, we had the under, but we felt like that the playoff ceiling is probably lower because we just don't really trust a lot of these guys come playoff time. It's hard for me to put my trust in, like a great postseason run from like a Ryan Rollins or a Kevin Porter Jr. or a Gary Trent. And I'm not saying it's impossible. Gary Trent Jr. had some big games for the Bucks last year, but I don't really see it. And this is not like a shocker. This isn't a hot take.
Right.
I don't think anybody was picking Milwaukee to come out of the Eastern Conference.
No.
I think just really the discrepancy was whether or not they were going to be bad or whether or not they were going to be good enough to be, like a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. And might that be enough given what we're seeing from the Eastern Conference right now?
Yeah, who knows?
I'll
That
say
team's
one.
cooked.
I'll say one more thing. True or false? Kyle Kuzma gets salary dumped at the trade deadline.
Possibly.
It's possible. The only reason why I might lean towards no might just be, like you said, I mean, all you can really get for him is a salary dump, right? And in terms of his contract, he doesn't have, a lot of years left, right? I believe he's got like 1 or 2 years left on his deal.
Mhm.
So my guess is that, I mean, I don't think they can realistically do a whole lot. So they might just be stuck with the roster they have, and they might just have to hope and pray that Giannis plus these guys is enough to be able to win a playoff series. Maybe somebody's hurt. Maybe Giannis just goes off. Maybe a couple guys get hot in the series. So I think he's probably stuck there. But I mean, he's already got. I guess he's got. He got his ring with the Lakers. But like you said, the last few seasons he kind of just fell off offensively. He had a efficient start to this season, but the last few games it's just kind of just tailed off, right? Like in the Lakers game, they weren't even guarding him; they were just leaving him open. Both him and Turner.
Yeah,
Actually.
can't shoot a lick. It's weird.
Yeah. So, but moving on, I guess we want to mention any more injuries. We can look over to the Atlanta Hawks, and they have won 5 in a row. And all of these games have been without Trae Young, right? They kind of got off to a mediocre start this season, and now they've been rolling, right? So we'll see what it looks like once Trae Young comes back. Jalen Johnson's been playing great. Kongwu's been playing great with Porzingis kind of in and out of the lineup. They're getting some really good production from Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who looks like he was one of the best signings of the summer, and pretty much has backed it up with his play. 3-and-D, the Wolves really do miss him, but what do you guys think? Because this was a team that was looked at as a dark horse team going into this season, right? Potentially a Eastern Conference Finals pick if, the Cavs and the Knicks can't seemingly figure it out. And, it didn't look like that in the beginning of the season, but they have looked better, but, Trae Young eventually will be back, right? We'll see what happens. I think that for a deep playoff run, I think they're going to need him to come back and play at a high level. He got off to a really ugly start to the season, so hopefully he comes back and he'll play better. But there is a really big discussion because there's a lot of people who feel like this team may be better without Trae Young. But I'm still in a wait and see period, and because in the playoffs, if he doesn't play, I don't know if I'm going to trust that all those guys are going to play at a high level. I've seen Trae Young do it. I know he's had a couple of bad postseason series as well. But what do you guys think? Because, I mean, Jalen Johnson, he's been playing great, and so far he's looking like he might be, an all-star in the Eastern Conference this season. I think we're going to have a ton of new all-stars
Yeah, I agree.
once we get to the all-star game.
Yeah, this team is one of the harder ones, I think, to figure out because I picked them to be the team to take, most likely to take a leap, I think is what we were talking about when we did that short or whatever. So yeah, I picked Atlanta to do that. And yeah, they've really been like riddled with injuries. Like Porzingis has been in and out. Trae Young has been out for an extended period of time. And like you said, they've been playing their best ball without him. Ricochet, I think, is out as well. So they're missing key guys, but they're still hooping, right? And it all goes back to Jalen Johnson. He's picking up right where he left off from last year, with a breakout year, balling on both ends of the floor, right? Efficient as well. And that's the beautiful part about it. And he's just really, phenomenal 3-level scorer that also has, great defensive intangibles and, stuff that you really can't teach. So I think it starts with him in terms of, what they've been able to accomplish thus far. Like the record isn't amazing. It definitely could be better, but a conversation definitely needs to be had because they're playing their best ball without their arguably best player. But I think Jalen Johnson is kind of taking the reins from Trae Young at this point because we all know when Trae Young's out there, it's kind of easy to beat that team at times, especially on the defensive end, right? Like you don't really need to do much, but really just force the switch and attack and hunt Trae Young, right? Granted, there are some great guys on that team, like you said, Ricochet, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jalen Johnson, like those are rotatable, switchable guys, but for some reason, they could just find and hunt Trae Young in any mismatch they want, and you're kind of seeing why they're able to rack up wins without him.
Mm-hmm. So I'm not gonna say hot take because I've been saying this for a while now. I think Atlanta wants to move on from Trae Young since last season. There's a reason why they haven't got a contract extension yet, and I don't think they will give him an extension. Trae Young has brought it up briefly, like, listen, like, it is what it is. Like, if I get one, I'll be happy to stay here. If I don't, we move on, right? Like, he's not requesting a trade, but he's just more like, we'll see what happens, right? And I think with him missing time and them winning games is actually bad for Trae Young. Because the front office is going to be like, man, listen, we're winning without him. But I do agree to Khristopher's point where playoffs where it matters, right? We've seen Trae Young take this team to the Eastern Conference Finals, right? We've seen him be the villain. We've seen him have big moments, and I think a lot of people disrespect Trae, but he could be a good player, right? Defensively, he's awful, like you brought up, Yarby. But if you look at it, offensive rating has been up, defensive rating went up, their winning has been up without him. I mean, those are key things for for a team in general, for all the disco stuff, nerds out there, coaching, like that's huge, right? And we haven't talked about Dyson Daniels, right? They got Dyson Daniels, they got Jalen Johnson, Aneko Congo. I'm glad that Capella moved off because he was ready to take off for a while now, right? So I like what the Atlanta's doing. I think they're a fun team. I think I'm not sure how the money would work, but I think this will be interesting. I think Trae Young goes to Memphis and Ja goes to Atlanta. Now let me explain. I think Ja needs to get out of Memphis. They're both like in a weird position with both of their teams. And they kind of, for Trae, he's not going to a contender, but Memphis continues to say they're trying to contend. I don't understand where they think they're contending, but let them be Memphis. Ja goes to Atlanta. Off the court, probably not the best situation to be in Atlanta. On the court, I think that's a new home. I think it's a new face where he can play. They're hoping, right, him to go back to the Ja Morant we all know, because Ja Morant regressed. Like, he's just, keep it a buck with you, he's just not a good basketball player currently. He's just not, right? Can't shoot, can't do anything. Also dealing with another injury. We'll probably get to that too. But I don't know. I just thought of some things on the top of my head right there, right? 2 point guards that probably not in the best spot right now with their organization. So, but good for the Hawks, man. I think they're one of those sleeper teams that will be coming, if not already.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll see where they're at once Trae Young comes back and, whether or not everybody keeps up their stellar play so far. I mean, Jalen Johnson, again, 60 from the field, basically almost 40 from three, over 20 a game, basically having a career year after he got off to a slow start kind of this season, right? Trying to find himself. In fairness, he was injured the second half of last season, and he's the key, along with Trae Young, to how far they can go. Because if he can keep this level up and they go into the playoffs and he's basically right up there with every other team's second option in the Eastern Conference or somewhere close, right? That's how they could potentially make a deep conference finals run. And especially if Trae Young also is a big part of that, then that's how he'll get his money. But we know with the CBA, it may be tricky to keep all these guys together because, you got Dyson Daniels, you got, obviously Trae Young, and then you have Jalen Johnson, who's already been paid. So how do you keep all these guys? Porzingis, what do you do with him? Do you keep him? Do you trade him at the deadline? Could he be one of those sneaky, let's bring in somebody different pieces with the way Okung was playing? It's a fun team, and it's a team that's got, like, I think a lot of good things going for them thus far. And I guess, since you already mentioned it, we can mention these last couple of teams, right, that are also dealing with a couple injuries where you got the Magic and Palo, and then you got Memphis and Ja, right? So I guess we can start with Ja, right? And he's going to be out for another couple of weeks with the calf injury. I believe he got hurt against Cleveland. And it was tough because they were starting to get back, their core starters, right? Because Zach Edey, I think, was basically back in his first game since last year's postseason, right? Because he had ankle surgery in the offseason. And then you had the starting five with Ja, Jalen Wells, Cedric Howard, who's been playing great as a rookie, then Triple J with Edey, and then Ja plays 6 minutes and gets hurt. And then pretty much that was that. So it's tough because this was a team that you kind of wondered what it was going to look like going into the season. I think their over-under was about 40, right? I think I picked the over just because I thought, well, I like some of the guys that they drafted, and, I like the backup guards that they have, so maybe they can win some games without Ja. Then those guys got hurt. So then they pretty much now have been awful. They're 4-10. Like you mentioned, top notch, of course, you're not completely out of it. You're not dead just yet. But now with Ja being out, with those other guards being out, it's just brutal because we haven't gotten to see one game with all their guys together at the same time, right? Because a big part of their appeal as a team is supposed to be their size and their length. And most of the time, it's basically been Jock Landale playing next to Jaren Jackson Jr. and no other real bigs out there, right? Because Clark's been hurt, Edey's been hurt. Just not a lot of good things going for them right now. So what the heck can this Grizzlies team really do at this point? Because they traded Desmond Bane. They did get picks back for him. I believe it's a swap between the Suns and the Wizards. And the Suns actually have been surprisingly much better so far this season. So we'll see which pick they get. But what do you two think about the Grizzlies and what they should do? Because, I mean, we knew what was probably coming with Desmond Bane, where they were going to take a step back. But the argument was, we're basically getting back Cedric Howard and a bunch of picks. We think Cedric Howard can be good right away, and he has been. But now Ja's hurt. Can you still really continue to build around him? He's their franchise guy, so I don't know if they're going to move on from him. But it's been pretty ugly because there were a few games this season, right, where he looked like he kind of just gave up, right? Because I remember that Lakers in-season tournament game where just on both sides, he was a ghost, right?
Yeah.
He didn't really do much of anything. And and as you mentioned, top notch, his shooting is gone. I mean, he was never a great 3-point shooter, but he can't even really finish around the rim too much either. He's below 40% from the field, right? That's kind of, that's a really bad sign just in terms of at his best. Even with him being a mediocre 3-point shooter, he could still be super efficient, because of his 2-point percentages. But he was one of the best players at the rim at his peak, a couple seasons ago. But now he's just completely fallen off. Maybe he's just been so banged up. Maybe the injuries are taking its toll. Maybe he needs a change of scenery. I don't know, but it's getting pretty rough out there.
Yeah, he needs to get out of Memphis. I think that's the only solution for him personally, right? And I guess that would be better for Memphis as well, depending on the haul that you get. I don't know what that would look like, but yeah, Memphis is just fried overall, right? Like they don't even really have that great of a guard room. I think Ty Jerome's been out too. Scottie Pippen Jr. So it's like they don't really have an answer at guard outside of Ja. Well, now they don't really have an answer at all, pretty much. So they're completely cooked, and I don't really know what you do because, like you said, his shooting fell off the cliff. Like it's really sad actually. Like I miss, like what 2023, 2024 Ja. Like that was so peak. 2022 as well. Like it was just wild. Everybody thought that he was, next face of the league alongside Ant, all that stuff. The debate always happens, but yeah, now I really don't know where you go from here because you've just been dealing with injuries on top of injuries. Brandon Clark out too, so you just haven't really seen, I guess, like the full vision of what this team really is supposed to be. And when you have, things haven't really gone the best, right? Like because, like you said, Ja's just really been just out of it. Like he doesn't even look like he wants to be there. So I think a trade is coming at some point. I don't know if it's going to be in the offseason or the deadline. Like you said, like it's tricky to, figure those kinds of things out, but we'll see. I don't know. I just don't think there's a solution but getting rid of Ja at this point.
I think the Memphis Grizzlies their time to compete to win a championship was when they let go of Dylan Brooks.
Fair.
Dylan Brooks was a big part of their culture. Like when you thought of the Memphis Grizzlies, you thought of Dylan Brooks getting in people's ears, right? Being annoying, fighting with LeBron, right? It's the same thing if you look at the Golden State Warriors or Draymond, right? Draymond does all the dirty work. That's what Dylan brought, right? So when he was gone, they had nobody to replace that, right? So then the years after, the Memphis was okay, but they just wasn't a good team in the playoffs, right? They couldn't really get over the hump. And then this season, I don't understand why Brandon Clark's on a roster. That dude's hurt every single year. Like he's if you want to talk about injury prone, that's the most injury prone player that I know, right? I don't think Zach Edey's good. I'm very interested to see what your guys' opinion on that. I don't think he's a good basketball player. I really don't. Jaren Jackson Jr. can't rebound. Y'all guys play 2K. He's a stretch big, and that's all he can bring to the team. That's all he brings. He can't play defense what people think he is because he blocks shots.
Okay.
They call him a great defender. That's not being a great defender, right? Because if you can't stay on your feet and you're always in foul trouble, and when your team needs you the most, you're never there. It's like, especially in the postseason, we've seen this happen over and over and over. So I don't think he's one of the greatest defenders. So that's the problem. Then bringing Cedric Howard's great. Having these picks is great, but their main thing was with Ja Morant regressing. Dad's everything. It's over. Like that's your star guy with Jaren Jackson, right? So those are your two guys. You're hoping that Cedric's there. You pay Ty Jerome, which Ty Jerome offensively was great for Cleveland last year, right? So you're hoping that you get your bench unit. He can help that out, but it never was going to work. This team's cooked, like Yarby says. Like I don't understand what this team can really do. And the sad thing about it too, Ja Morant's playing so bad that I don't think he has any trade value. I think teams are going to come to them and be like, yo, listen, you might get a first-round pick out of me, but I'm not giving you really anything special. Take it or leave it. And so I think Memphis is going to be put at a point where they're going to be like, well, you know what? We're going to have to keep him. But I think if Ja makes it messy and makes it ugly like Jimmy Butler did, then they're going to have to force to trade him. Right now, he's not being messy. Right now, he's kind of chilling. I think with this injury right here, we're going to learn a lot about this team. If Memphis comes out and they start winning games, oh man, these headlines are going to get worse and worse for Ja Morant, right? If they become kind of like Atlanta in the situation with no trade do with Memphis, but yeah, they're cooked. I think they have no future either, right? Like, what's their future? Like, they have Howard and Edey. Like I said, I don't think Edey's the greatest player. I think he can have, but I just don't think he can move his feet. If you can't move your feet in this day and age, and you're getting put in a pick and roll, what do they do to Karl-Anthony Towns? Karl-Anthony Towns is a horrible defender. They go at him every single time, and that's what they did to Edey. And Karl-Anthony Towns is a better scorer. Edey, you know what I mean? He's nowhere near to that.
Yeah. Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think they're in a bad spot, but like I said, this is the NBA. Anything can happen. Stuff is unpredictable. They can make a big move. They could trade those picks if they're tradable, flip for something, and their players are getting back. So,
yeah, I mean, if you're the Grizzlies, we talked about it this summer, right? Where you're kind of at a point now where ultimately how successful you can be, a lot of it hinges on the depth, but also your two best players, right? Because if Ja is this now as opposed to what he was a few seasons ago, then you really can't go that far, right? Because ultimately you can probably really only go as far as how good your best player can really take you, especially in the Western Conference. So at one time, right, he was in that conversation for top 10, right? He's not really, at least as of right now, in that discussion anymore. And Jaren Jackson Jr., right, if he's a number 2 and then Ja's your number 1, but it's not the same Ja, that's just not good enough to realistically be able to win a ton of games, especially with the young group of guys that they have, right? Like KCP is one of the handful of vets that's there, I guess, along with Landale, but it's just not enough. So, like you said, I'm curious to see what it looks like while he's out, especially if some of these other guys can kind of come back and they can be close to being whole, just because that'll kind of give you a good outlook of, hey, if you can get back a good version of Ja, just bring him back and then just kind of let him work things out and then win some games and see how far you can go. But I don't think the ceiling is a championship anymore, which is wild because, like we said a few seasons ago, they were looking these other teams in the eye, like Golden State, the Lakers and other teams like that, but it just hasn't worked out. And I think, like you said, it is a culture issue where it just seems like the culture has just kind of fallen off. Dylan Brooks, look at what he's doing in Phoenix, along with even, Desmond Payne got off to an ugly start in Orlando, but it is looking better. And I guess we might as well move to that team next too, right? Because
Can I ask a question real quick? Just one
sure, go
question.
ahead.
I have a perfect short for us guys, right?
Mhm.
We should do a thing where in Ja Morant, we ask a player who's better than Ja Morant currently right now. Right? Example, like is Russell Westbrook better than Ja Morant? I think so. Like who would you take over Ja right now? Because I think that's how bad Ja has been. Like seriously,
Okay.
right? Like
Well, I mean, I
I
guess
think
if
that
you
was
were to rank like, all the top point guards, how many point guards could you name before you get to Ja Morant, right? I mean, I think you could probably, if you look at a lot of the starting point guards, right? I mean, even guys like Cade Cunningham, right? Like at one time, Ja would be considered way better than Cade, but
Mm-hmm.
Cade's up there now, right? He's one of the best, point guards in the league, right? I mean, so you got him. I guess, Garland, he's been hurt, so I don't even know how you can really factor that in. I mean, I guess,
another
healthy
fraud.
Garland, is he better than Ja? But Brunson, Maxey, I think right now, I think so far this season, Maxey, you'd have to put him up there. I mean, I guess if you look around, go to OKC in the
Edgecombe.
Western
Give me
Conference.
Edgecombe.
You said VJ Edgecombe?
Give me VJ Edgecombe.
Okay. I mean, he's a two,
Okay.
but I guess, so
It counts.
far he's had a better season, I guess, at different points. And then even in the Western Conference, in his own conference, right? SGA. I mean, that was a guy where at one time he was not considered better than Ja. Now he's probably considered the best guard in the league, right?
Yeah.
If not two. So you got him, you got Luca.
Do they
I
consider
mean,
Book a point guard right now? Is Book a one or two?
I feel like most people see him as a two guard, but he had to play point guard, I guess, for Phoenix
Yeah.
the last few seasons. So either way, he's been better than Ja this season.
Yeah. Regardless,
So
Harden.
if you yeah, so you said what?
James Harden.
I would agree.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Fox,
exactly. So
Yeah.
we're
Mello,
Fox.
Garland,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Derek
so I
White.
mean we're pretty
Dude,
pretty much
dude, Derek White
already
been
past
awful
like
too.
yeah, so I mean you're pretty much at this point, 10 guards past him. Before you even mentioned Ja, Tyrese Halliburton before he got hurt, where would you put him? Would you put him ahead?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so we're pretty much already past, 10 point guards before we even get to Ja.
Giddy.
And like you said what?
Giddy.
Better this year. This year.
This year for
Yeah.
sure, bro.
We're talking about this year though. Yo,
Yeah,
Christopher,
we're just talking about this season.
year.
We're just talking
We're
about
not
this
talking
season.
about overall. Like this
No,
year,
of course not.
Ja been horrible. Like he's not. He honestly, he should be benched. That's how bad he has been.
And that's
38 from the field. It's wild, bro.
and that's the thing where you're wondering, is it so bad where it's like, is it really who this guy is, or is it just like one of the worst slumps that we've seen, from a star level guard, right? Because it's like it can't be this bad, can it be?
Who knows? He might have been dealing with injuries before this one too. I don't know. I have no clue.
Yeah, yeah, because against OKC, right? He had that game 3 before he got hurt, where he mentioned that. Yeah, I think we figured out Oklahoma City. He was playing great, and they were beating the brakes off of Oklahoma City, but then he got hurt, and that's just been the unfortunate case for Ja the last few seasons, where we've barely seen it. I mean, in terms of games played, we hadn't even really mentioned that, but I mean, if you want to look at it, so far this season he's played 12, so he was actually relatively healthy this season. But last season, 50 games. Before that, 9 games, right? And then before that, 61 games. And then after that, the previous couple of seasons, that was like the 72 game COVID season. So 57 and 63. So his first 3 years, he was relatively durable. But since then, he's missed a lot of time. And Memphis was able to win games without him when they had the backup guards. But they've all been hurt this season. So I think at the very least, could you hold on and maybe wait and see if Scottie Pippen Jr. or Ty Jerome can help save you? But you need your best player to be really good. So that's the concern right now. But now moving on with Orlando, Paolo, he's been out. He hurt his groin against the New York Knicks. They were crushing the New York Knicks before he got hurt, and they were able to keep it up. While after he got hurt, Franz Wagner, Anthony Black, Jalen Suggs, right? This was the game I think where Jalen Brunson got hurt,
Mm-hmm.
right? So he was in a boot, I think, in crutches after the game. He's listed as questionable, so he might be on his way back soon. But the Magic have gotten off to a not great start this season. Now, they are, I guess, 7-3 in their last 10, so that's good, right? They just got a win over the Warriors as we were recording, and that's without Paolo. But it's so bizarre because I feel like when are we going to get the stretch where we get both Paolo and Franz together winning games and playing really well at the same time, right? Because we got off to it kind of last season, I think, right? And then Paolo got hurt, then Franz carried, then he got hurt, right? And then eventually they both came back, but then the team stunk, right? Because Jalen Suggs got hurt. And that, I guess, has been the divider, right? Desmond Bane got off to a hideous start to begin the season, but he has been much better as of late. And that was the guy that they gave up a lot in order to get, right? But the last few games, right, 26 points against Houston, right? He had a big game against the Warriors tonight. He had 19 points against Brooklyn, 22 against the Knicks, 22 against Portland. So he's getting back to what we were seeing before he got hurt, right? And this season, they were better offensively than they were last season, because last season they were the worst offensive team in the league, basically, even though they were one of the best defensive teams in the league. But this season, they've taken a pretty big step back on the defensive end, which is bizarre because that feels like such a huge part of their identity, right? Like offensively, they're 20th right now. And it's like, okay, I guess they were horrible last season, so that's better, right? But then on the defensive end, they now moved up because they were in the bottom half. Now they've moved up to 12. But I need them, if you're the Magic, I need you to be in the top 10 defensively, right? On the offensive end, I don't necessarily need you to be top 10. But can you be average? Can you be close to average? Could you be 16th, 17th in offensive rating, and then maybe you're, 6 or 7 on the defensive end, right? Can you be better on both ends of the floor? Because the defensive end, I mean, that's their identity, right? And we know that they made the trade-offs offensively where you trade KCP, you bring in Desmond Bane, you bring in Tyus Jones, who has not really been a factor at all this season. Anthony Black's been better as of late, but I just want to figure out what's going on, right? Because because when I watch them play, their offense is still bad, and it just seems like they can't get good stretches with all their guys playing well. Like, this last game against Golden State, they did a great job of attacking and used their size against the relatively small Warriors team. But again, that's without Paolo, right? Like, that's Franz, that's Jalen Suggs, Anthony Black, and I just want to see all these guys play well at the same time. And then in terms of their bigs, right, it's Wendell Carter Jr., who's had a bounce back year, especially on the offensive end. You got Goga as the backup. They're still missing Mo Wagner, right, who's kind of their energy scoring big off the bench. And then there's Isaac, right, who's kind of supposed to be their big defensive stopper. He just hasn't been able to stay on the floor consistently. So I don't know. I mean, what do you guys think? Like, where did people go wrong with this team? Because I think this was a team that both Yarby and I were very high on. Believe we both had the over for them winning over 50 games. And I don't see it right now. Now, of course, it could change, because like I said, they're 7-3 in their last 10. They have looked better on both ends of the floor, but Paolo's out. But I do want to be fair to him in that they were crushing the Knicks before he got hurt. So I think there is a formula for them to kind of pick their spots, but there may be some kind of weird, bizarre pairing where maybe just both of those guys, it doesn't necessarily work, but I want to give it a chance to see what it looks like when all 5 of these guys are healthy and they're playing well. Because Bane did get off to a bad start, and Paolo got off to a rough start. But I think if you can get your main guys to play better and then just kind of figure out bench-wise, depth-wise, because it really doesn't feel like they're deep at all, other than Anthony Black, who's been great. I don't know. What do you guys think? Because I can't figure this out.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of similar to what you said. I think the main problem is they're not as deep, I think, as we initially thought, for sure, right? Like, there's some guys who aren't really factors. Like, I thought bringing in a guy like Tyus Jones would be perfect, right? Like, that's the guy who can kind of operate your bench like he did in Memphis, like he did in Minnesota. Yeah, absolutely not. Like you said, pretty much a non-factor, whatsoever. And then I think it starts at the top, though, with Paolo. I'm tired of seeing him settle for horrible contested mid-ranges. Granted, like you said, he hasn't been doing that as of late, and with the injury and stuff, that doesn't help. But before he was hurt, there were times when you just got to use your big body and get to the rim, and just bulldoze people like we know that he can, while also being a great playmaker. I'm tired of him settling. I'm higher on Franz, I think, right now than I am Paolo. It has nothing to do with the health. I think they're equally, not durable at all. So it has nothing to do with that or anything like that. But definitely in terms of play style, I think I prefer, Franz. He seems to be a little bit more of a more consistent with less volume, and I think I like that a little bit more, especially in a wing like that. But I mean, I feel like Paolo was kind of on pace to be one of the more underrated, point forwards in the league. But I don't know, it just seems like bringing in Desmond Bain kind of threw a wrench in that whole thing, and he just felt like he needed to settle. And I don't know, it's the weirdest thing ever. And like you said, I don't know if those two can really coexist. I have no clue, but they're missing those bridge pieces. I think Jalen Suggs being as good as he is, and coming back definitely helps. He has been on, I think, a little bit of a minutes restriction, but his stats look good. They're kind of easing him back into for regular season form and stuff like that. But they're just missing more guys off the bench, right? Like Jace Richardson, not really a factor. Jet Howard, not really a factor. Tristan Da Silva has been a bright spot as well, alongside Anthony Black. So shout out to those two young guys. But like outside of that, there's nothing really going for them. Jonathan Isaac kind of fell off a cliff offensively and defensively, in my opinion. You do have, Wendell Carter Jr. and you do have Batazde, but I think things are too spread out at the moment, so they need to kind of consolidate and find more talent and more depth. But I thought they were super talented going into the season, but some guys just haven't really panned out, and the injuries don't help.
I look at the Magic, man, and they just throwing darts at the board when they get draft picks, and they're missing. They're just doop, oh, miss, doop, miss, because they have all this potential, right? All these players that come into the draft, right, and get drafted and go to Orlando, like maybe this is going to be a good piece, and it takes time. I get it, but a lot of their players haven't really played too well. And I agree with you. I was going to say that too. I don't think Paulo Banchero. I think he's just doing too much. You just need to relax. Let the game come to you. For a player that is not a great 3-point shooter, who takes a lot of contested mid ranges, you're going to struggle in this game, and that's why I think France is the better player. Like you said, with less volume, but France overall, like if you could shoot, you're always going to be ahead of your peers, because it's just a shooting league. You need to know how to shoot in this league, right? And so I personally don't know if this group can play together in the sense of Paulo and France. And I think they're going to try to make it work, of course, right? Because you're looking like, we got Paulo and France. These are two young guys that we can build off, right? That's their goal. But I don't know if it's going to be able to work. And then adding another wrench, adding Bain in there, it's only going to make it tougher. A lot of teams that make big moves and add that third guy, sometimes it works, but majority of the time it doesn't work, right? And so they're turning it around, but guess what? Paulo's injured. So we don't know what's going to happen when they're all fully healthy and stuff like that. When Jalen Suggs gets off his minute restrictions, that means the ball's going to be in his hand a little bit more, right? So like it's going to be interesting to see how it works. I was high on them too. As a Heat fan, I'm like, we gotta worry about this team. And of course, the first game of the season, we lose to them. But another team that we'll see what happens later in the season. We'll see if Paulo figures it out. Can he work with France and all this other stuff too? So overall, I think France is the better player though. And if they do have to make a decision, it's going to be tough. But you gotta let go of Paulo. You can't let go of France. I don't think they get to that point. They're not going to let it, right? Because their main goal is to try to win. You don't trade that much draft capital for a player like Desmond Bain and be like, it's not working out. Let's move off pieces. But overall, in a couple of years, if they can't figure it out, I think France, you stay with France, which I don't think they will, though.
Yeah, this season from three, right, France, so far 36% from three, because the last couple of seasons, this 3-point shot was really bad. He was at 28% 2 seasons ago, 29.5% last season. So can he get back to his first couple of seasons in the league where he's at 35, 36%, just league average? One of those two guys has to be at least a decent 3-point shooter, right? And then, hopefully, ideally, they're both good 3-point shooters, but they both can't be bad 3-point shooters, right? And so far, Paolo this season, 25% from three on fewer attempts. So he is still shooting 46% from the field. So he's not taking quite as many threes. It's just, if he's going to take them at all, it's going to have to go in. And I know that sounds very cliche where it's like, oh, well, you just need to hit more of your shots. But I do think it does start with their stars being better. So if you can get anything close to the Paolo we saw last year before he got hurt, with this new, hopefully improved version of Franz Wagner, Desmond Bain figures it out. I don't know, because, even we talked about off the bench, like with Anthony Black, he's looking pretty good in terms of getting to the rim, but he also can't shoot the 3 ball that well either. He's at 31% from three. So, a number of guys that you've invested heavily in are just not known for being strong three-point shooters. Even Jalen Suggs, last year he was down to 31%. He had improved it a couple seasons ago where he got to right under 40. And this season he's shooting 40%. And so I think, as you guys mentioned, with the minutes restriction, he's at 22 minutes a game so far this season, but the last few games it's ramped up a little bit. So I think that'll get better, but he's also a guy that is not known for being able to stay healthy. So, how many games are we actually going to be able to get with this full core of guys? I don't know, but I at least want to see it and give it a chance before I just kind of immediately bail on it. And we may not know until later this season, just because how many games are we going to be able to get to see them play at full strength? But they are playing better as of late, because like I said, it was very awful to begin the season, and they still have a lot to climb in order to get back, but they are getting closer, right? Like they're 10th in the East, which is not great at all, but they're only a couple games away from getting back into the top 6. So if they can string some more wins together, I think they'll be okay. But, it doesn't quite feel like they're going to be the team that we probably expected going into the season, because I just feel like we would have seen it a little bit sooner rather than later. But, maybe I'm wrong.
I agree with you.
Yeah, so then I guess last but not least, we'll end on, I guess, a more positive note. And we have a player returning, right? So we have LeBron, right, who's missed the last 14 or first 14 games of the season, coming back to play for the Lakers, right? And the Lakers, they're sitting at 10-4, currently 4th in the Western Conference. Luka, Austin Reeves, basically playing at, great MVP / All-Star levels. Everybody else contributing: DeAndre Ayton, Rui Hachimura, guys in and out of the lineup. So we've not really seen, a ton of games with both of their guards together. And then obviously we haven't seen the big three together at all. But he is expected to make his return against the Utah Jazz. And what are we thinking, right? Because, for me, I just feel like you're adding LeBron. If he's going to get back to anything close to what we saw last year, it should be a positive. But, some people might make the case that they've been on a roll, they've been on a tear. It may be a little bit funky to kind of ingratiate him back into the lineup. And now you have to kind of figure out, all right, well, who's going to get touches where, right? Who's going to play when and where? Because some guys that have been playing, maybe they get kicked out of the rotation. But I think it's going to be a positive. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think it's going to be overall positive. I think, this is one of your best players, right? Like, there's no way that I could really make the argument that it's going to hurt the team, in a major way. Outside of maybe defensively, I could see them maybe taking a little bit of a step back defensively. But, in terms of that, I think it's just really going to make you a little bit deeper, in my opinion. I think, there's going to be times where, like you said, some guys probably aren't going to play as much, if at all. But, it's still got to be next man up mentality. And I think they need to kind of continue to have that same identity that they've built through the first portion of the season. And yeah, I don't think one player is going to, destroy everything that they've kind of built up until this point. So, yeah, I think they'll be all right. And we already know it's LeBron James. Like, I think the expectation is going to be that, I'm not going to say he pops off, but he's going to help them win games, I think, for sure, as long as he stays healthy.
Yeah, I don't listen, I don't think this is a major deal. This is not like it could be a star player, right? But this is LeBron at the end of the day. LeBron could fit into any system. Like, he's going to figure it out no matter what. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think we got to overthink it. Listen, it's what, 10, 13 right now. They play in 15 minutes. So we're going to see them play real soon against this Jazz team, which Larry Markins is having a great year. But I think the only thing it doesn't affect, but I think he gets less attempts is AR, right? I think Austin Reeves, we've seen it in the playoffs when the big three was playing together. Now, necessarily, Austin Reeves didn't have the best playoffs, right? But I think, obviously, with just LeBron being there, he's going to get less attempts, which I don't think it is what it is, right? It's LeBron. You know what I mean? And I honestly think LeBron Ayton has looked surprisingly good. And I say surprisingly because I thought it was a good signing, but I thought his energy is like, he's just a lazy person to me, right? But I think Ayton is going to look even better, right? LeBron's playmaking is great. Add that with Luka already. I think that's going to help. I think Marcus Smart has been playing well, playing his role. So interesting to see how this team plays. And it just sucks because, like, when I say it sucks for Khristopher, you just can't beat OKC. So, like, the Lakers are going to have a great season, and no one's going to be able to beat the Oklahoma City Thunder. No one.
Yeah, and that's kind of the question that a lot of these teams are going to have, where you kind of look at it so far in terms of net rating, like OKC's been beating the brakes off of everybody, and do you really have a real chance at being able to do it? And it's just tough, right? And that's the problem that all these teams in the West have is like, hey, you guys might be good, but there's another team that's right there that looks like the best team in the league, and they might crack 70 wins. They don't even have their second best player coming back yet, who may be even better than what he was last year if he gets, healthy and gets his legs back under him. But I do agree with both of you where I just don't think you have to galaxy brain a lot of this, where we've already seen LeBron play with these guys, and it'll change the roles somewhat. Like Austin Reeves, maybe he'll be more of a spot up guy where he'll have to take, some more spot up threes or attempts or whatever. But just in general, I think LeBron is going to, we saw him already take a step back, to kind of try to make the fit work with Luka, right? We kind of saw him try to do more of the little things, and they're going to need him, right? Like they need his size, they need his length, they need his athleticism, they need his rebounding, they need, his ability to bark out defensive orders to all the guys on the floor. Like they need all of that. So, like I said, I think it's only going to be a positive. It's just a matter of, how much better, are they realistically going to be? Because they are good. It's just, when you look at their net rating, right, it is amongst one of the lower net ratings for the teams that are up at the top. And a lot of that's because of the defense, and they have not been that stellar defensively this season. And both you and I already kind of talked about them this summer, where we both felt like, as currently constructed, it's not a championship team because you don't have enough athleticism. You do need more defensive oriented guys. And that's kind of where some of these other teams are at, right? Like you look at the Western Conference, even a team like the Warriors, right? Maybe we'll touch on them in another episode, but some of these teams are kind of in this spot where you're good, but you have to make personnel upgrades if you want to get to the next level. But even if you get to the next level, can you realistically beat Oklahoma City? But it's worth trying, especially if you don't have to give up, a bajillion assets to go out and get somebody, right? So that's what I would expect these teams to approach, this deadline with. But I mean, OKC and Denver, I mean, especially OKC, they're really good, so they're going to be really tricky to beat. And I mean, going into the season, I had Denver, but the only case I can really make, even with them, is it's really hard to go back to back, and OKC might be poised to do that. Going into the season. So I'm excited to see him come back. Because again, all these older guys have played really well to begin the season, right? Shout out Steph, shout out Durant. Both of those guys have been fantastic. Even
Shout out
Harden.
Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, even Russ, right? He might be the best player on the Kings right now so far this season. And then Harden, right? He's played great, on that Clippers team that's been really struggling as of late. All those guys have been fantastic. So you're about to add another one to the mix.
Yes, sir.
I got one thing to say. Last thing I'll
Mhm.
say about LeBron. The only thing that's going to be a negative is his dumb heat checks where he gets the ball from half court because he hits 3 threes and says, "You know what? I got to shoot from half court." And it's complaining on the defensive end and him walking up because he's talking to the refs. That's the only negative that you're going to get out of LeBron, bro,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Because he does that all the time, and that's never going to change.
Yep.
Yeah, and
Always.
that's the thing. Yeah, and that's, one last note. Yeah, like in terms of his catch and shoots, like he's basically a 40%, catch and shoot guy. And, that's going to be one of their best 3-point shooters being added to the team because they're actually not that great of a 3-point shooting team, right? Like a lot of their offense is coming from like mid range, at the basket, free throw attempts, and things like that. But he's going to help spread the floor and give them another guy. And, like you said, there are possessions where, the non-ideal possessions, right, are like the sidestep threes where there's a center switched on them. But I think the hope is that now that you got these other creators, you don't have to have as much of that, and you're going to get some possessions where hey, he's just going to have a wide open three because they're double teaming Luka or putting their best defenders on Luka and Austin Reeves. So I'm curious to see what it looks like. But both you and I said going into the season, the team as currently constructed isn't quite good enough. They would need defensive improvements on that end. But like I said, I think a lot of teams are probably in kind of a similar-ish boat.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, now we'll close it out like how we normally do, with our polls. And so in our last post, we asked the question about basically where should Anthony Davis be traded? So we had multiple responses, but we got 50-50 in terms of Chicago Bulls and somewhere else, right? So in terms of the list, it was Bulls, Hawks, Pistons, somewhere else. And so far, in terms of the responses we've gotten, like I said, it was split on either the Bulls or anywhere else. That could be possible. I don't think every team can do it, and not every team is going to do it. But what do you guys think of that?
That sounds about right. I think, the Bulls make sense. I think that's his hometown. So that only, makes sense, I guess, to kind of close out his career a little bit. And I think they potentially have the assets to, make Dallas, feel okay about letting him go. And then somewhere else, I mean, that could be, anywhere else at that point. So
on the list, I also mentioned the Hawks and the Pistons.
Yeah, that would be interesting too. I don't know if those teams would feel comfortable trading for somebody who has, such a bad injury history, but I mean, Atlanta did it with Porzingis, so why not? I think I could see them doing it potentially. Maybe that's a Trae Young kind of thing. Doubt it, but yeah, who knows? I don't know. That could be interesting. We'll see.
I think he stays with the Dallas Mavericks, and I think he only stays with the Dallas Mavericks for one thing. I don't think he ever gets healthy. I think the injury that he's dealing with right now is it's concerning, right? We got an update with Shams, I think, a couple of days ago that he's going to be out for 7 to 10 days. It's a calf injury, and these calf injuries, we've seen what happened in Tyrese Halliburton. So I think, and not even trying to make a joke, but even if he does come back, I wouldn't be surprised if another injury happened. Like, that's just who Anthony Davis is, right?
Yep.
So all these injuries are going to build up. And trade deadline is going to be here before you know it, and teams are just not going to willing to trade for him. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then I'm seeing a thing of that Kyrie Irving's trying to rush to come back, which I think is a horrible decision. If Kyrie Irving's trying to come back, then I don't see AD being traded. But at the end of the day, this is the Dallas